Hello and welcome to my session for Azure Back to School. This is the 2025 edition of Azure Back to School. Thanks, Dwayne, for putting this on and for having me. And this is the talk for Friday, the 19th of September. GitHub Copilot and Azure Bicep, your IaC excuses are toast. And I am Brian, and this is me. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, it's linkedin.com/n/Brian L. Gorman. Otherwise, you can find me on the Twixter at x.com/BL Gorman. So there's not going to be any slides in this entire demonstration. This is all going to be live. The whole point of this is that we have no more excuses in today's AI world for not correctly architecting a solution with some sort of infrastructure as code. Now, my flavor of choice is Bicep, but you could just as easily do something very similar with Terraform. So let me just talk to you about the solution that we have that we're going to make a little better. So currently, as I record this video, I'm finishing up my book. I'm on chapter 14 of 14, which I'm excited to be done. It's the Practical Entity Framework. It's going to be the 3rd edition. It's going to release in November alongside of .NET 10 and EF10. And along with that, I built a solution for chapter 13 to use in the modern deployment section called the Inventory Manager Web. It's just a website that lets me view the data in my database for an inventory manager. It's nothing spectacular by any means, but because it's targeted for the world and not necessarily for people who have a lot of infrastructure as code, and the book isn't about infrastructure as code, it really lent well to help aid in this demo by actually making that more useful for most people in a script. So what you see here is that the actions for this repository currently have an orchestrator. The orchestrator has, so we have the build and test solution here. That's our first workflow. So obviously just build and test the code. Our second workflow is actually a publish image. So this is going to build a Docker image and publish it to a GitHub container registry, which means that I need a container registry token in order to be able to do that. And the final part is the ability to just deploy the web here. So the last part is deploying, and the deploy script is really what I want to attack with this talk. Essentially, if you look at the other ones, they're pretty straightforward. The build and test just builds tests, and that's all it does. It doesn't even package or deploy it anywhere. The publish image is the step where we actually just build it out into GitHub. So let me just do this. And you can see that it's tagging the image with latest and all the stuff that would do, logging in, using your token, all the things, pushing the Docker images, all that's done, the repo is built, etc. So nothing there really needs to change. This is just building and packaging. That's all that is. So as painful as the deploy step. And what you see here with this deploy is you're going to see that there are some secrets that are in place, which we're going to need no matter what we do. Client ID, tenant ID, and subscription ID. That's for the managed identity at Azure that we're using to deploy this. And so hopefully you're familiar with that. If not, we'll talk about the managed identity in just a minute. But those 3 secrets are going to be needed no matter what we do, even when we switch to using Bicep. The repo then goes ahead and does a whole bunch of things to plan out where this is going. So resource group name, a location, SQL Server, SQL DB, app plan, app name, the admin, the password, the service SKU, container username, and the image. So we're basically building this entire thing as we go. So all of those are also going to be important when we build this with Bicep. But where it really kind of is painful is after you get logged into Azure, everything else in this is scripts. So you got AZ group create, SQL Server create. We got SQL Server firewall. We got SQL DB. We got an app service plan, and we got an app service. And that uses the container here to deploy. So no big deal there. And then it uses a web app slot as well. And then it does some config permissions where it sets things like the container registry, app service storage, resource group name, things that are set there just for the config itself. Then we have config for the container for the staging slot as well. Then we have a problem with this where we had to remove the legacy local SQL server just so it wouldn't connect to the wrong SQL server. And then we have to do setting connection strings. So this is pulling in connection string and basically writing this and setting the connection string for the two different database connections. It's the same database, but there's two different connections used in the app. And do the same thing for production, making a health check, restarting the web app, and swapping staging. Now, we aren't going to do all of this with Bicep, but what's really painful about this is that every time this stage of the orchestrator runs, it basically has to run this script, and it's very prone to errors. It took a long time, a ridiculously long time, to get this script right, to go from start to finish. But once it's done, it's pretty sweet. I'm not going to lie about that. But making it so that it had to do this was pretty painful. I was pulling my hair out a couple nights. And it's very hard to maintain. It has a lot of chance for error. Wrong things could go horribly wrong. And it's just not super sweet. So what I would like to do is propose that over the next few minutes, we use GitHub Copilot to do a lot of this work for us to make infrastructure as code. Now, our fallback could always be ChatGPT or Claude Code or whatever your AI tool of choice is if you don't like Copilot. But Copilot, if you have it, is sufficient and does a really good job to make these scripts, these Bicep scripts. All right, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to create an issue in GitHub. So I've obviously preset this here, but basically I'm telling the person who does this, I'd like to leave everything in place. Please don't modify anything in the current files. For next iteration, I want to move to Bicep. I'd like you to create the following. And I have been pretty verbose in what I'm asking for here to give it a lot of help. A file named main.bicep under a folder called IaC, a main.parameters.json to hold the parameters, the main file at the subscription scope, create a new resource group with a name passed in by a parameter defaulted to RG Inventory Manager Web. After creating a resource group, use modules. In the folder modules under IaC, create two folders inside of that, database and web. The database folder, do SQL Server. The SQL Server, pass in these parameters for the name, the admin user, and the password. Output the name to be used in the next part where you create the database. The database folder, create SQL Database Bicep. Take in the parameters for the database SKU, the SQL Server name, which you get from the existing resource, and the SQL DB name to create. In the web folder, create the app service plan. Along with that, you have the SKU and the name. I did leave out something here, so I'll do this. Make sure to append, actually, I'm sorry, I didn't leave anything out here. This is fine. The app service plan name doesn't need to be unique. It's the app name that needs to be unique, and I do have that. So the app service plan name is fine, the SKU is there. In the web folder, create the app service Bicep, parameterize the following, the app name, and then compose that with a unique string. In the web folder, create another file to modify the configuration, parameterize the following, SQL Server name, SQL Server admin, SQL Server password, SQL DB name, web app name to get the existing resource to attach to config. Add two app service environment settings for connection strings for the inventory manager, identity, and connection databases, both following this pattern. Now, this isn't everything we need, but this is a lot of stuff, and that's often something you need to be really careful about when you throw too much at Copilot or even ChatGPT or Claude Code. A lot of times, the more you add, the more problems it'll have. So I want to be 100% transparent here. This is the first time I'm running this. I haven't practiced this. I've done similar things before, so I'm confident it will at least do somewhat good. But I'm going to go ahead and copy that just in case something goes horribly wrong. And I'm going to create the issue. Now, the issue here has a lot of checkpoints. Now, I really like to use these checkboxes because that means that Copilot can actually check these boxes as well as it does stuff. So this is probably too much for one issue. I probably should have done this in maybe 4 issues, started small and worked up just to allow Copilot to not have too much overwhelm. But I thought, let's try it and see what happens. So what's really cool is once you have all your stuff in your issue, you can actually assign Copilot as the person you want to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and say, Copilot, why don't you do this? And I could put labels and projects and all that stuff on it, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Copilot. So Copilot, what it will do is create a work in progress GitHub branch. And from that branch, it'll start actually building stuff. So you can actually see what it's doing. You can watch its progress as it goes. It's telling me that if it had Copilot instructions, it could do better. I'm going to let it run. I'm going to let it run as it is. We'll see what happens. But you see this view session button here. I can use this to see what Copilot's doing. So if I click on that, I can watch the pot boil. So you can see Copilot is going to actually run and do some stuff. Now, in the interest of our life not being too terribly boring, I'm going to go ahead and not record all of this. And I will come back to this recording once Copilot is done. I expect this to take anywhere from 8 to 15 minutes. Maybe it'll surprise me and go faster than that, but we'll see. And when it's done, though, I really hope that I will have some really nice Bicep for infrastructure as code that I didn't have to write a single line for. I just had to describe what I wanted. All right, so it has been about 8 minutes, and the initial run by Copilot is now complete at GitHub. It is very verbose in what it has done, which you can actually really enjoy because you can see all the stuff that it did as it went through each step, what it built. So here it's building the parameters file. Here it's creating the SQL Server module. So you can see all the code that it created step by step. If you want to review this on your, as you're processing through it, you can see what's going on here. Maybe you might recognize an error and be able to correct it if you saw that at this point. It's pretty solid what it's done. But what's really even cooler is it's running bash commands now to check to make sure that it's doing the right thing. So it's checking to see, what's happening. So validating the main Bicep syntax, making sure there's no error. If there's an error, it could go back and correct it. So it says, I need to fix the errors and warnings. So again, it's going to be working like a developer to build your infrastructure as code and hopefully come up with the best solution. If not, at least a very similar to the best solution. And you can see that there's quite a few steps that are run. At the end, it kind of says, yeah, I've verified this. Everything seems to be working. And then it even made an ARM template file to kind of compare, and then it removed it because it didn't want that. It says, I've done this. Here's what was delivered. And you can see that it made the IaC folder, a main.bicep, parameters.json, the modules folder, the database folder with the 2 files, the web folder. And, it picked the Linux app service plan. Thank you very much. I'm using containers, so that's a really good idea, but it really wouldn't matter anymore. Everything runs on Linux now, so it's really nice. It also gives me a summary of what it built. It says, we did this thing, we did that thing. We did some Bicep best practices. It has a checkbox of kind of like how it validated. It says, hey, if you'd like to run it, you could run this command. So, within a few minutes here, less than 10 minutes, it has generated some Bicep file for me. Now, are they right? I don't know. Let's take a look. So it made a pull request, and now I can review the pull request just like if any other developer had made it. You can see, hey, oh, look at this. Would your developers have created such a robust documentation of what they did? I doubt it, which is really nice. Here we got, this is what I built. Here's the folder structure. Here's what I added. So this is quite a nice documentation for even the process, even if you have to tweak it a little bit, right? So it changed files, 7 of them. So here's main.bicep. So now I can take a look and say, does this look right? So it did default to RG Inventory Manager Web, like I asked it to. It's got, lots of nice descriptions, locations, SQL Server name, admin user. It does have that set to SQL admin password is secure, which is good. So it seems to be doing pretty good. The database SKU is basic. That might be a problem being a small b. I'm not sure if that matters. P0 v3 for the SKU, Inventory Manager Web for the app name base. There's the resource group that it's made, and then it says, oh, look, the modules, just like I asked it to. The SQL Server module passing in the parameters it needs, the database module passing in the parameters it needs, app service plan with the parameters it needs, and there's the app service, running after the app service deployment using the app service plan here. And then you got the service config, some output files overall, and then you can go through. Here's the main parameters. You can see the main parameters it's trying to set. And you can change the password if you want, different things like that. I think I might change that to a capital B just because I'm afraid the small b will fail. I don't know if it matters or not, but I know that it's capital B in the system usually, so I'm going to go ahead and tweak that myself. Maybe I'll run it. Maybe I'll go crazy and run it, because you never know. Maybe that's what maybe it knows better than me, right? The other thing that it does do that maybe you want to take a look at is sometimes it uses the wrong versions here. So existing SQL Server here at 2023-05-01 preview, there might be a newer version of that. So I might go through and tweak some of that just on my own, just to make sure that it's the most recent. But okay, so here's this Q mapping. It's capital B basic there. So this is interesting because it seems like it's doing some sort of mapping it can use, but yet it's still going to maybe take in my basic. It's a 2 gig database. This is what I expected. And I have the SQL Server that's being created itself, the SQL Server name, one SQL Server, 2 databases, right? So we don't have to worry about it. My app will create that, right? So I probably didn't even need to make the app service, the SQL database file, because my app uses migrations, so it would create it. We have a staging slot. We have web app name, app service config. So you see that all the stuff that I most likely need is all baked in. So there's all the stuff. I'm going to go ahead and say, yep, this is pretty good. I probably could scrutinize this harder if I wasn't doing a video, and maybe make a few changes or ask Copilot to change some stuff. And it would definitely do that. Just like if you were going back and forth with code review, you can make comments on it. I'm going to go ahead and accept this and put it in and be done with it here, just to move forward. If it doesn't quite work, it's not gonna break my heart for this demo. What I'm more interested in showing here is that there's really no reason at this point not to move forward with this stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and merge it. I could have done all the nice things like rebasing and such. I don't care right now. But now if I look at my code base, we'll see that I do have the IaC folder, and there's all the modules, all the things. And if I go down to my local machine, I do a git fetch and pull. Be able to see that it'll bring in the IaC folder and all of the stuff here as well. So I did say create a database, a basic database, and I have the SQL Server that's out there. So everything is in place for one database. I am just going to use the one database for both connection strings, so actually it'll be okay. It'll be fine. And so that should be pretty good. But as you can see, I've done very little work. I am going to change this one to be a capital B, and you guys are going to yell at me, but I'm just going to do it right here on main. Just to add that really quick. And we'll just push it out there. So right now I do have a build in process because I did that for the scripting stuff. So if we went back to that, we would be able to see it. That pushing to main actually did do a merge on that. It's going to build the original one. So I did ask it to leave stuff in place. You see that I have a published image. I have the service deploy. I'm interested in why it's saying it doesn't have any runs when there's build, publish, and deploy that ran earlier today when I was setting this up. So not really sure. So while that's building and kind of messing me up for the minute, let me take a minute to talk about the next part of this. So now that I have an infrastructure as code architecture, obviously I probably want to deploy it, right? So we need to be able to deploy that into Azure. Right now, my web app is done into the GitHub Container Registry as a Docker file compiled into an image. So I can pull that anytime I want. So that really is kind of outside of the scope of what we're doing here. What I really care about is, well, I have this infrastructure as code. How do I build that at Azure? So the most important pieces of that come down to how do we connect to Azure and how do we make all that work? Well, basically, you need a managed identity. So you have a managed identity that you will be able to use. And the managed identity has to have a client ID and a subscription ID and a tenant ID. And those are the 3 secrets that combined allow you to do stuff against your Azure subscription. So you take those three pieces and put them into your GitHub secrets. Along with that, you need a federated credential, which says, in this case, I've set one up here. It says, if I come from my repo, this is me, my repository, and if I tag this thing as environment dev, then it builds this signature here, which is just basically, just basically the repo, the name of the repo, so the owner, which is me, or your organization, the name of the repo, and then a colon, and then this environment :dev. So my other one, just so you know, you can have multiple federated credentials. So my other one is deploying off a branch. So it's just basically saying anytime that goes to branch main. So it's the same 4 pieces, except in this case, it's a ref's heads main instead of a branch, instead of an environment. So this isn't as safe because this means anytime that this pushes to main, it's going to push. And if I set this up against the wrong environment, it's a big problem, right? So I actually mostly like using environment variable because now I can say, I can guarantee that this only runs if the trigger on the workflow says it's a dev, and therefore it's only going to deploy to the environment of dev. So and then you can do your whole environment matrix and all the things that you want to do with that. So you need that managed identity. You need that to be able to be set up. One other piece about the managed identity is it has to be a subscription contributor. So you got to make sure it has the Azure role assignment of subscription contributor. Otherwise, you won't be able to deploy into Azure. So this is basically a two-way handshake where GitHub has information about the credential at Azure with the 3 pieces: the client ID, the subscription ID, the tenant ID, and Azure says, okay, even if you have those, you can still only use them if you come from this federated spot, which is GitHub with those credentials. So it has to map from the exact branch or the exact environment from the exact repo with those credentials in order to actually be able to execute. So even if you had my 3 pieces of information, you shouldn't be able to do anything with it because you aren't coming from my repo. So it's supposedly more secure and safe, and I've really felt like it's been a really great improvement, honestly. So at this point, the last piece I want to do is I want to use Copilot one more time to build out the workflow to deploy stuff. So this thing's still going to run. It's going to be done here in a second. But what I want to do is this last piece of the puzzle is go back to Visual Studio Code itself. So I pushed to GitHub and I didn't even make the save. That's awesome. Look at this. How many times have you guys done that? Probably less than me, right? So I pushed and there was nothing to change. That's funny. Okay, so you see over here on the right-hand side, though, in Visual Studio Code, you have your agent mode. In your agent mode, you can choose who you want, or basically what agent you'd like. So you can be GPT, you can be Claude Sonnet, you can be Gemini, GPT-5 Preview, O4 Mini. You can see that certain models are free. So 0 requests, they're 0x premium. So I can use GPT-4 or GPT-5 Mini Preview, or Grok Code Fast 1 Preview. I may need to do some credential setup if I use Grok, though I'm not really sure. I've never tried that one. The rest of these should run no problem, and it won't even cost me any premium requests. So as you might be aware, though, that might not be the best solution. I've had a lot of good luck with Claude Sonnet 4, and I've not tried GPT-5, honestly. I do use GPT-4 a lot as well, just because it's free. But it does not do as well as Claude when it comes to more complex things sometimes, so just keep that in mind. But with that and all of that, basically, I can do the same thing I did at GitHub with my agent now locally. So down here, what I can say is, can you create an orchestrator YAML workflow that calls to another workflow that runs the IaC from an environment dev to deploy the architecture to Azure. Only trigger if the IaC folder or anything under it has been modified. All right, so I'm going to ask it to do that, and we'll see what it does. Like I said, a little bit of live coding here, a little bit of fun, but we've spent less than half an hour, and maybe at this point we'll end up having a really nice workflow built for us. And so it's asking us if we'd like to create or just orchestrator. If you want both, I'll generate the orchestrator and simple deploy for you. I'm going to say do both, please, and we'll see what it does. I was going to try to create orchestrator.yaml and deploy.yaml. This is going to be a problem. Deploy.yaml was already out there. So orchestrator.yaml was also out there. So this is a problem, right? So I'm going to have to undo all this because it's going to overwrite the stuff that I already had, which is unfortunate. I should have thought about that and looked at it more closely. See, now it's like, oh, I'm going to change all this stuff. I don't want to do this. So I'm going to undo everything it's doing. Actually, I'm just going to stop it. So I don't have to wait. I'm going to undo everything. I'm going to say, yes, get rid of it. I'm going to say, I'm sorry. The names need to be unique. Do not overwrite any files I already have. All right, so we'll try this again. And we'll see if it, to avoid overwriting, now create a new orchestrator work. So now we have the IaC orchestrator. So I should have seen that first, my bad. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and keep that. And I might have blown up. So there's IaC orchestrator using the secrets, and it's gonna run deploy.yaml. So this is unfortunate. It still thinks it wants to use deploy.yaml. So I'm gonna say, you still need a second deploy to deploy-iac.yaml to run the Bicep deploy action. And it'll be like, oh yeah, you're right, I do. So there's deploy IaC. There's the workflow call, passes the secrets in, Ubuntu latest, Azure checkout for Azure login. There's my client ID tenant subscription, deploy Bicep. I don't like that it's stacked that close, but that's just me being picky. And you can see that it's using the resource group name. What I don't like here is that it doesn't have the environment. So I'm going to say, can you add the environment dev tag to the deployment so that it can log into Azure with dev environment credential match. And so it's going to easily add the environment dev there. Try that. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be name or not. I'll have to look that up. It said it could do this, but I don't believe that. I don't believe that's right. I think it actually needs to be this. I could be wrong. I don't have this stuff memorized by any means, but you can see now I've got a workflow it's going to trigger. This needs to deploy -IaC. So I'm helping it out. I could have had it change that, but what's the point of doing that, right? So I got deploy IaC going out and calling, being called from the IaC deployment orchestrator, which is on push the path IaC. So anytime I change any of my infrastructure as code, this should trigger, which would then call the deploy IaC, which is going to say, hey, go get your credentials from secrets, which trust me, they're in my repo already, and deploy that by checking out the code, logging into Azure, and then making sure you can deploy the IaC. It did pass the resource group name here under the environment. I'm not really sure what that's all about. Yeah, I don't usually add that to my workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and keep what it did though, because I think it's pretty close. I think I am going to remove this. I don't really see a need for that. So again, I'm helping it out a little bit here, but you see how fast this is going? Like we're less than half an hour and we're almost going to have a full orchestrated deployment, provided it works, right? I mean, there could be a whole bunch of issues. But the other thing I said was looking at some of this Bicep, some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. We have all the resource stuff being passed in. We have all of the different resources being called from the modules, the outputs there. There's the parameters. Again, basic was one thing I wanted to change. The other thing I want to do is I just want to go through and really quickly check and make sure these versions are the latest versions. Because again, I think sometimes it falls a little short here. So you can see there's a 2024-11 preview. So I'm definitely going to update that. It did try to help me there, which is interesting. I want to make sure that it is the latest, but yeah. So just getting the latest versions of the deployment. Now, is that a model limitation? Maybe the model wasn't aware of that version, or it just, this is the default that is chosen, whatever. I'm not sure, but I do find that, going through here and doing that really quickly does tend to help make sure that things actually deploy. Because sometimes, as you might be aware, different versions do have different stuff that needs to be sent to it. And the latest ones have to be used on the, in Azure, because Azure changes all the time. So we want to make sure that these are up to date with the most recent. And even 2024-11 seems old at this point. So it should be all right. But I mean, even if I use the 2023, it would likely be all right unless something has changed. Really quick, there's my SQL Server. And that'll be interesting. That might have an extra dot in it because that seems to be screwed up. We'll find out. Initial catalog, user ID, password, encrypt, trust SQL Server is true to override any SSL needs. Obviously not production ready, but it works really great out of the box. You don't want to mess with certificates. And there we go. So, and the app service plan, the server farm. So you can see that these versions are just a little bit older than what you probably want to use. In the main, maybe even the resource group would be off. Let me double check. Yeah, it looks pretty old. What's nice is that as soon as you get some help there, it's right there. Okay, so we have some stuff there. Going through the main here, let's just add Inventory Manager Web, ABTS Live. So it's just something new. Inventory Manager SQL. Let's change this to ABTS Live 2025. We'll just do that. That's good. SQL Server name that was there. The web app name. There's the app service plan. There's the app name. So Inventory Manager Web. It should have a unique actually appended to it. So let's just double check that. On the app service itself, when it creates it, it is adding a unique name to it. So it'll be unique, so I don't have to worry about that. Yeah, so it is not going to be deploying the Docker image. So whereas my script did all the stuff and deployed it, I will need one more workflow when this is all said and done to actually deploy the container image from the GitHub Container Registry to my build. I'm not going to worry about that tonight. At this point, let's push it out there. Update the IaC and YAML. So once again, now this is going to cause a dual build because this one, the old one, is running off of just any push to branch main. So I don't like that they're both going to build, so I'm going to go kill the one so that it's not going to conflict. Not that they would, they should be in different places. All the things should be different, but it never hurts to protect yourself, right? So I want to make sure that I don't want to build, let's see, did we not get a push? Did I forget to push? Did something fail on the push? It did say it committed. I never pushed it. Haha. Make sure you push if you're expecting things to be building at GitHub. Don't sit there for 10 minutes going, why isn't it building? All right. Okay, so Inventory Manager build and deploy, IaC deploy. So that's the one I want. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel the run on the Inventory Manager. Now, this could blow up in my face. Maybe it's not going to work. I don't know. There could be some configuration issues, a whole bunch of things going wrong, or it could work. One other benefit now, not only do I get rid of that massive script, I now have infrastructure as code, which is modularized, a lot easier to maintain. Yeah, so I've got a GitHub token failure. So I've got some other things going on here. I need to have write permissions on my workflow. That's an easy fix, something that Copilot missed. So let's actually see if I can do it. Hey, can you add the write permission on the IaC workflows so that I can use them to deploy to Azure. We'll see if it gets it right. If not, we'll just grab it off the other one. So again, you might have to tweak it a little bit. You might have to know what you're doing still, but we're doing pretty good here. So it's going to add, ID tokens. I don't think it needs contents right though. I think it just needs read for contents. So I don't really like that. If I look at my other one, my other orchestrator, yeah. So there's the permission that should have gotten. So it was close. I'm gonna go ahead and keep it just so it shuts up, because otherwise it'll sit there wondering if I accepted it or not. And it seems to be missing something there too. Let's look at this. So yeah, we need a jobs and we need a name of the job, and then we need stuff we're doing, right? So deploy IaC uses, okay, why is that red? Jobs are already defined. Oh, goodness. Goodness gracious. Okay, so Houston, we had a little bit of a problem there. And then let's just double check this. I'm still not sure that's correct. Not going to worry about it till we find out it's an error. And we're going to say update YAML. So what's going to be interesting now is that we didn't actually update any IaC. So the only trigger is unfortunately going to be the other one. And another problem is that I just realized that this doesn't have workflow dispatch on it. So we need workflow dispatch so that we can run it manually. Now, if I would have remembered all this stuff, I could have been more explicit in my instructions to Copilot, but I'm still pretty happy. I haven't built a lot manually, and it's still doing a lot of the work for me. So let's go fix the fact that we're running 2 builds we don't want. So we'll cancel that. And if we see if we got another one running. Okay, so far so good. Did I not push again? I need somebody here to say, hey, you forgot to push. Live demo needs live people. All right, so now it's going to be running again. One last time that I don't want. So let's go ahead and cancel that. All right, and now that that's all said and done, now I can go to the IaC deploy orchestrator and I can run that with a workflow dispatch. And hopefully this time it'll work and we'll have everything out there at the end of it. So I'm going to pause it and I'll let you know if it works. It didn't work. Resource group expected 1 argument. So we don't have the right parameters to the resource group. So the good news is that we are able to log into Azure. So at least that part's working, but our resource group deployment didn't work. So let's take a look at it. So on the main.bicep, we said, hey, we're trying to do the resource group. And that would be up here. Resource group name and location. All right. So I paused it, cheated a little bit so I could find the error. The error is that for some reason it decided to run this deployment group using this, which is not what I would like it to do. So I am going to see if it can fix it for me. Can you change this to use the bicep deploy command that takes in the bicep file and parameter file and does not use scripting? So we'll see if it fixes it for me. I didn't see that the first time. So it's hey, AZ bicep deploy, file and parameters and resource group. That looks a little better. Let's go ahead and push this up. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use this over here. So stage it, bicep fix, bicep deploy fix, command push. And of course, because of the way that my other trigger's set up, we got to go kill that build. So, not ideal, but I could let it run. It's not hurting anything. It's just in the way of my demo. So then we'll go to deploy IaC to Azure. And IaC deploy orchestrator. Let's try this again. And we'll hopefully see it work this time. Or we'll figure out why it's not working. Hey, everybody always gets green on the first time in a deployment, right? Thought so. Okay, so we'll let it run, see what happens. I'll let you know if it works. Error. Deploy is misspelled or not recognized by the system. Okay, so I didn't look at this closely enough. This is still not right. This is not what we want to do. This is using an AZ CLI command. I want to use the GitHub action, not an AZ command. Might not be able to find this. Maybe I'll switch to Claude. Let's see what it did this time. Azure ARM deploy. That's the old version. I'm going to switch to Claude. See if it does better. The latest Bicep deploy action. There we go. Azure Bicep deploy. It's still thinking. I'm ahead of it here. I have to let it finish. So it's going to see if it does things right. Okay. It feels pretty confident. So this is still using Azure ARM deploy. So I'm not a big fan that it's not finding, neither one of them is finding this correctly. So I'm going to try a different avenue. So we're going to look at the official documentation here, see if we can get some IaC from this. Nope. Nope. Bicep. Azure Bicep deploy at V1. This is what I want, right? With the resource group name, template file and parameters. Go to the actual documentation. So type deployment. Change that to V2. Go to the latest version. So scope is going to be the resource group, template file. So the scope is subscription because we're creating the resource group. So this is actually what we want. We want all of this. So the type is deployment, operation is create, name is whatever we want to call it. So we might actually even tag in like a GitHub ID on this, right? So this is deploy architecture inventory manager, and then GitHub run ID or something. So it gets a unique ID every time. And we're doing central US. Yep. And the subscription ID is this guy. And we're doing main.bicep. And we're not doing a bicep param. We're doing main.parameters.json, which should work. That time I'll remember to push. And hopefully, finally, suddenly we feel like we're in more of a pipeline scenario where we're taking what was a half an hour and turning it into an hour. But I'm still pretty happy if this works after an hour versus the amount of time it would have taken me in the past to create all that YAML and all of that bicep. So let's try one more time. And if it doesn't work, I'm still just going to call this good for today because at this point it's just troubleshooting, right? At this point, I hope I've shown you enough that we have some bicep tools. We have some GitHub action tools through Copilot, whether we do that by creating an issue and running it in the portal, I guess, the GitHub portal by creating an issue and assigning Copilot as our developer, or if we work locally, interact with the Copilot on our machine. But there are no more excuses for us to be able to develop solid solutions very quickly now that we have these AI tools. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will let you know if it works or fails by clicking on that and seeing that it did fail. And that's because I'm missing main.parameters.json from the path where I thought it should be. So I fixed the path. I've got to fix this GitHub run ID. Should have been a $sign. So live coding. And it worked on the first try, right? So it is working now. It did deploy. So within a few minutes, I would say, it took what? 30 minutes to figure out how to fix the IaC. Another 30 minutes on top of that to do all the Bicep with Copilot. So within an hour, I've pretty much done a basic deployment from start to finish, created the IaC and the YAML and got it deploying into Azure, which is pretty darn sweet. And that's definitely going to wrap things up here. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. Let me know if I can do anything to help. Reach out, connect, let's talk. But thanks again for having me for the Azure Back to School, and we'll see you again next year. Thanks.